Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 3 of our story, and we've got to a very exciting part in our story. We have a woman called Aunt Beth who's very, very, very fussy and particular about her son Billy. She's absolutely terrified of anything happening to her son. And she's left her son in the charge of her nephew, a 16-year-old boy called Sam. And Sam has been looking after his little cousin overnight, and he's fallen asleep on the couch and woken up to discover a couple of burglars have broken into the house. So it's a very scary ordeal for him. So let's continue with our story. "What's the bloody name of the book that Marcus needs us to get?" asked Ernie. "Trout, give me that piece of paper, will you, that he gave you? I need it now." Trout began fumbling around in his pocket, rather awkwardly, like a teenager desperately looking for a packet of cigarettes he was sure he had in his pocket, but now appears to have misplaced. Trout began turning out his pockets, removing sweet papers and an old receipt that he tossed out on the red carpet indiscriminately, without a care in the world, blindly oblivious that he was leaving behind a trail of DNA evidence. "I can't find that damn piece of paper. Where is it? Marcus gave it to me, I remember he did. And I put it in my pocket. I definitely put it in my pocket," he said, sounding alarmed. "What have I done with it? I know it was here. I was sure it was in my pocket, Ernie. But I can't find it. How can this happen? I know I put it in my pocket. I know I did. What have I done with it, Ernie? You ignoramus! What the hell is wrong with you, Trout? You may have bloody gills, but you haven't got any brain in that head of yours. I need that bloody paper to find the name of the book we're looking for. How am I expected to find it if you've gone and lost the bloody thing? I can't even remember the name of the book offhand. Only you could cause such pandemonium like this, in the middle of a robbery. I can't believe you, Trout. You can't be trusted with anything. I can't rely on you to do anything right, can I? Unless, of course, I do it myself. It's so typical of you to do this. I knew you would do something stupid like this. I'm now going to have to phone Marcus, aren't I? He's going to think he's hired a couple of airheads to do this job for him. He's not going to be impressed, but you leave me no choice in the matter, do you?" "Oh, I know where I put it, bro," said Trout, suddenly sounding proud of himself. "I've just remembered. I put it inside my boot. I knew I couldn't lose it if I put it in my boot. Sometimes things fall out of my pockets, so I thought it would be a lot safer if I kept it in my boot. It's all come back to me now." "You're an idiot, that's what you are. Things drop out of your pocket, Trout, because you eat so many bloody sweets, and leave a trail of sweet papers around you wherever you go. Even a squirrel knows better than you do. You better pick those papers up before you leave behind any evidence. So you decided to put the note in your boot, did you? And nearly forgot where you put it? That's so typical of you. What the hell? Are you bloody mad, Trout? Talk about making life so much more complicated. You're holding us up with all these warped ideas of yours. Get a move on, will you? I need that note now, so I can find the bloody book we're looking for. If we carry on this way, the Valinskis will return home from the party and catch us in the act. The whole idea of this job is to do it quickly, discreetly, and efficiently. But you're dragging things out with your absolute incompetence. No one would ever believe you spent a stint in prison. You learnt nothing from the other prisoners there. Now give me that note, will you? I can't wait here all day." Trout began digging around in one of his boots, looking for the paper. He couldn't remember whether he'd put the note in the left or right boot. He could see Ernie was losing it. Finally he found the note and handed it to Ernie, who snatched it out of his hand abruptly. Sam listened to the strange interaction between the two butter-fingered burglars, who clearly didn't know what they were doing. There was no doubt that Trout, whoever he was, appeared to be a bit of a buffoon. Sam doubted that they'd ever broken into someone's house before. They were complete novices in that regard. He found himself fumbling around with his cell phone in his pocket. Maybe he could get these burglars' voices on tape. The police might be able to identify these men by their voices. Right now he didn't feel that threatened by the men anymore. They looked harmless enough, and were more like a couple of bumbling idiots rather than two skilled cat burglars with the potential to turn violent. Sam's anxiety had significantly subsided, although of course he didn't trust himself to pounce on these men with an iron poker. While the men might indeed be ham-fisted and lacking nimble dexterity, they were a lot stronger than he was and could easily overpower him without a shadow of doubt. These men, although lean, had bulging biceps and enough brawn between the two of them to snap open a walnut with a pinky finger. Sam didn't doubt they spent countless hours in the gym lifting weights, when it might not have done them any harm to employ a spot of bar work in a gymnasium to acquire some much-needed agility, which both men were sorely lacking, and would probably be a useful asset if you intended to make a living out of breaking into people's houses without being caught. Sam pressed the record button on his cell phone, but he had accidentally pressed downloads instead. It was too late to do anything about it now. All of a sudden the lion's roars he'd played to his cousin earlier on in the evening, before putting his cousin Billy to bed, could be heard in the library. It was an absolutely petrifying sound that made you in no uncertain doubt that a dangerous predator was in your midst, and worse still, probably only standing feet away from you and about to pounce on you. "What the hell? Did you hear that, Trout?" Ernie cried out in horror. "There's a bloody tiger in this room! I'm telling you, there's a tiger in this room! And I'm not joking either! These bloody people, the Valinskis or whatever you call them, keep a tiger as a pet! And it's guarding the owner's books, for God's sake! These rich folks are wacko, I'm telling you, Trout! Who keeps a bloody tiger as a pet? I think we've woken up a sleeping giant tonight. I'm telling you, that thing is behind the sofa over there. And it's watching us! It's watching us, Trout! I can feel it there. Do you know, I knew when we came into this library that something was watching us, and I wasn't wrong. I didn't want to say anything to you, but I could feel it. I could feel the predator. He's behind the sofa. We need to get the hell out of here." "A tiger," came Trout's trembling voice. "A tiger! You think there's a tiger in this room? It's going to kill us! It's going to kill us, isn't it?" "Of course it's going to bloody kill us, Trout! It's a tiger, for God's sake! Quit stating the blindingly obvious, will you? You can hear it's upset. Because it's got a frightful roar on it. We probably woke him up, thanks to you making such a commotion trying to get that note out of your bloody boot. We need to get the hell out of here. I'm telling you, that treacherous thing is behind the couch, and it could pounce on us any second, and God forbid what it's going to do to us." "Oh, I knew this job for Marcus was a bad idea," whimpered Trout. "I told you not to do it, didn't I, Ernie? But you wouldn't listen to me, would you? I didn't have a good feeling about this." "Quit whinging, Trout, will you? We need to get out of here as slowly as we can. Whatever you do, don't you dare panic. That will excite the tiger. Act calm. Remember, it's the owner's domesticated pet. It's probably used to people. People have even petted it, I imagine. So we might get out of here unscathed if we keep our wits about us. So don't do anything stupid to excite it, or to provoke it to anger. He's already aggrieved with us, you can hear by the sounds of the growling. We don't want to upset the creature any more. He's by nature a wild animal, and if we act scared, it will pick up on our negative energy and kill us without even squirming. It's their instinctive behavior, isn't it, to chase after anything that moves at a speed. I'm telling you, the Valinskis are absolutely insane. These people are completely nuts, bonkers over the top. To keep a wild animal like this inside a library of all things. I'm not sure it's even legal. It's like carrying a hand grenade around and expecting it not to explode." Ernie began patiently backing out of the library, indicating with profusive, rather dramatic hand gestures and whispers for Trout to do the same, and to follow his lead. But Trout was not watching him. The terrified man could only stare at the couch, his body shaking like a leaf. Even though he was wearing a balaclava over his head, his terrified eyes seemed to grow as wide as saucers, and were very visible to Sam, who could sense the man's panic. It was as tangible as the scent of laundry detergent on a washed piece of clothing. Trout's eyes looked like a blue-grey colour, and they remained fixed on the white leather sofa, almost as if the sofa itself might in a blink of an eyelash morph into a tiger and give him chase. Sam could almost imagine Trout's skin paling behind the ski mask, as it drained of all colour. Ernie had backed out of the library as quietly, discreetly, and as methodically as he possibly could, but his whole body betrayed his obvious angst, as it swayed precariously like a tree branch in a wild windstorm. He wobbled unsteadily on his feet, as if he was struggling to stand upright, while his head remained stoically fixed on the sofa. Sam could not blame Ernie for thinking that a wild animal was in his midst, for the astonishingly good recording of the lion's roars was too close for comfort, and so real. You had to believe that the creature was in the room. It really did feel as if the tiger was lying low in the library, behind the sofa, even though the roars were made by a lion, but it was easy to believe that something very dangerous was there. Sam kept playing the lion's roars again and again, to get both the men to evacuate the house speedily. They had long since forgotten about the book they intended to steal, and the duffel bag that was lying half open on the luxurious red carpet had been ignored and abandoned. Sam grinned proudly to himself. He could see the panic in the men's frantic behaviour, and to his surprise he was rather beginning to enjoy himself. Once Ernie was in the passageway, he directed his attention to Trout. "Now listen to me, Trout. You're going to back out of this room very, very carefully. Do you understand? Try your very best not to run. I know it's tempting, but you can't afford to do it. Take it very slow, will you? Just like I did. The tiger will chase you if you move too fast, or show any sign of panic. He's already warning us with those growls. Once you've joined me here in the passageway, Trout, we will discreetly close the library door behind us to contain the tiger, so he can't pursue us. Then we will hightail it to the kitchen as fast as we can, and get the hell out of this house through the kitchen window. Get it?" Trout failed to listen to Ernie's sagacious advice. He promptly ran out of the library as fast as he possibly could, overtaking Ernie and shrieking in terror with ear-piercing shrill cries. Both men began to panic and make a hasty scramble to the kitchen, with Ernie behind Trout, telling him to shut up because the tiger was on their trail. In their blind panic, both Ernie and Trout had failed to close the library door behind them, which might have been a good idea if they believed the library contained a tiger. Indeed, so convinced were they that they were being pursued by a tiger, that even though nothing was chasing after them, they believed they were definitely being pursued by the creature. "It's behind us! It's behind us, Trout!" Ernie cried out. "I can hear its breathing! Oh my God! It's going to kill us, Trout! It's going to bloody kill us!" Ernie and Trout had run through the house like two jackrabbits, not daring to look back for a single instant, as if they were terribly afraid of what they might see. It was in the distance that Sam could finally hear the roar of a car engine starting up, and then everything in the house went very quiet, and normality resumed, almost as if the robber's presence in Aunt Beth's home had only been a glitch in the matrix and hadn't really happened. Sam was not surprised the men panicked to hear such a formidable, terrifying roar in Uncle Dylan's library. It must have been very unnerving for them. Even hearing it again himself, and knowing it was a recording, had made Sam's nerves rattle. But when you didn't know it was a recording, you'd absolutely believe that a wild cat like a lion or a tiger was loitering around the library. Undoubtedly the two burglars believed that Uncle Dylan kept a wild animal in the house to guard his collection of very treasured books. Ernie had been convinced the roar came from a tiger. Sam smiled contentedly to himself, because his Uncle Dylan's books remained safe, and so did Billy, sleeping upstairs, so all was well. He knew how some rich people indulged in strange idiosyncratic behaviours, so it was reasonable for Trout and Ernie to assume that his uncle kept a wild animal on the premises. Whoever Marcus was, who had orchestrated this theft, he would likely be informed by both Ernie and Trout that the owner of the house, Dylan Valinsky, had a tiger guarding the place that had come very close to tearing them apart. No, they hadn't been able to steal the valuable book. And yes, unfortunately, they had left behind their duffel bag containing some of their break-in tools, as well as a pile of sweet wrappers that had fallen on the carpet, that Trout had dropped, leaving a trail of DNA evidence behind. But none of that could be helped. Sam was quite certain that both men would highly exaggerate the danger they had been in. But one thing was for sure, they'd never come back to the Walensky's house, so Uncle Dylan's collection of books remained safe. Sam hurriedly sashayed to the kitchen to examine the damage of the broken glass. He was expecting to find a shattered window, but the men had managed to climb through an open window without much trouble at all, as a couple of the bars in the windows had been bent backwards using a powerful tool that he was later to discover in the duffel bag that the two men had left behind in their haste. The broken glass was Aunt Beth's favourite crystal vase that had obviously been accidentally broken by one of the robbers during their maladroit, blundering attempts to get through the half-open kitchen window. The glass vase had been resting on the window pane, and no doubt Trout had knocked it over. The glass lay across the marble slab, as well as on the floor, and petals from the flowers lay scattered liberally everywhere, like bridal confetti. The men had left a dreadful smell behind them in the library that was quite repugnant. Sam realised it was the smell of terror. All of a sudden Sam thought about his cousin Billy. He'd almost forgotten about him. How relieved he was to think that Billy was tucked away safely in his bed upstairs, and had no idea that two intruders had broken into their house during the night, who would definitely not be coming back, if they believed a wild tiger was loitering around the house. No one in their right mind would do that, unless they had a death wish of some sort. Sam ruminated over everything, and decided he would not tell Aunt Beth what had happened tonight. What would be the point in that? He knew that if she had even a smidgen of an inkling that two intruders had been ferreting around her house while her boy Billy was fast asleep upstairs, that Aunt Beth would never forgive herself for going out that night to the party. Sam knew his aunt's pedantic, overly protective behaviour towards Billy would ultimately get worse and worse, and the poor boy would grow up being completely suffocated and smothered by his well-meaning mother. No, he couldn't let his cousin be subject to all that. Helicopter parents were the very worst. He decided he would tell Aunt Beth he had accidentally broken her crystal vase by mistake and was dreadfully sorry. He would also offer to pay for the damages. The less Aunt Beth knew about the break-in, the better. As for the bent bars in the window, he'd managed to use a wrench to help pull them back in a position, but they were falling apart. He doubted his aunt would notice them for a long while, for she left the window half open most of the time. Sam decided he would brush the events of this inauspicious night under the carpet, as if it hadn't happened at all. "I better check on little Billy," he thought, climbing up the staircase quietly and taking a peek into Billy's bedroom. He froze in the doorway when he realised that Billy's bed was empty. Perhaps Billy had gone to the toilet, or maybe he'd heard the robbers and had hidden in the closet or under the bed, as kids that age would be inclined to do that when they were terribly afraid. Of course, that made perfect sense. Ernie and Trout had made quite the commotion breaking into the house that night. Was it any surprise that Billy had been awoken by them? "Billy!" Sam called out. "Billy! Where are you, Billy? It's safe now. The bad men have gone. They aren't coming back." But Billy did not respond. Sam began to frantically search for his little cousin, and panic seized him when Billy was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had mysteriously disappeared off the face of the earth. Where the hell was he? In his desperate haste, Sam began to hurriedly open closets, look frantically under beds, and through every single nook and cranny in the entire house. He was half expecting to see a frightened boy staring up at him with wide, innocent blue eyes, wearing a cute pair of Mickey Mouse pyjamas, and asking Sam if the two horrible men had gone. But Sam could not find Billy anywhere. He soon realised, after seeing the sliding door in his aunt's bedroom was ajar, which led onto the balcony, where in the far corner there was a discreet fire escape tucked away very inconspicuously, with narrow winding iron sets of stairs that led down to the backyard. That was it, Sam thought. Billy must have used the fire escape to abandon the house. Sam knew his Aunt Beth would not have left the door in her bedroom ajar, as she was always particular about keeping doors locked. In a trice, Sam came to the swift conclusion that little Billy had slipped out of the house by way of the fire escape. That had to be it. He must have run off to hide somewhere in the woods, which was a brave, rather noble thing for a 7-year-old boy to do, given he was sure that if Billy had been anything like him at the same age, that his little cousin was more than a little terrified of the dark. Sam suspected his little cousin must have heard the burglars entering the house, and been so desperately afraid that he had overcome his fear of the dark and slipped out in the darkness to evade the men. Maybe he thought the strange men would harm him, probably because Aunt Beth was tirelessly warning the little 7-year-old not to ever trust strangers. There were bad men in the world that couldn't be trusted, that wanted to hurt little children like Billy, while offering them lollipops and sweets and pretending to be nice. Aunt Beth had wanted to be sure that little Billy had his wits about him at all times. "I've got to find Billy," thought Sam. He knew if Aunt Beth had any clue about what was transpiring right now, she'd probably be rushed to the ER after suffering from a major heart attack. Aunt Beth was so highly strung, so overly protective over little Billy. So if she knew Billy was missing, she'd literally fall apart like a bag of wheat that breaks open, spilling out all its grain over the threshold of the barn floor, and leaving behind a sizable mess that was by no means easy to sweep up. Sam needed to find Billy before his aunt and uncle returned to the house at 2:30 in the morning, when they were scheduled to arrive home from the party. Sam still had time on his side. He knew he needed to find Billy, and find him as fast as he possibly could. Sam hurriedly rifled through the closet in the entrance hall, and on a shelf he found exactly what he was looking for, a large torch. There was one you could carry in your hand, and one you could wear on your head. He'd use both forms of lighting, as he needed all the help he could get in locating little Billy, as quickly as he could. His cousin could be hiding anywhere. The last thing he wanted to do was to circumnavigate the woods in the middle of the night, searching for his cousin in a tenebrific maze of trees. But he didn't have much choice in the matter, so he needed to find his little cousin as soon as he possibly could, and time was of the essence. As Sam slipped out cautiously into the night, shivering more from nervous trepidation than cold, he made his way to the woods, leaving his reluctance far behind him. The cool night was fragrantly anointed by gasps of fresh cold air that brushed unabashedly against his cheeks, as if blowing sweet kisses on his face. The dark sky was illuminated by a half-moon. It was the rich colour of a velvety black evening gown that was magnanimously studded with a glamorous diamante bling. It was rather unfortunate that the moonlight this evening was pitifully miserly in her generosity, for the light she cast out was exceedingly subdued. Dense dark shadows framed the crooked footpaths that in Sam's opinion looked rather like cardboard cutouts, from the tall lofty silhouettes of the trees to the lumpy well-rounded shapes of shrubs and bushes that made Sam's journey through the trees become infinitely more menacing and unfriendly at this late hour. Everything was ambiguously unexpressive and indistinctly vague. Luckily Sam's torchlight cast away the ominously dark shadows, as if dusting away stray cobwebs from the corner of the ceiling. He was exceedingly grateful that he could pretty much see where he was going, so his search for Sam was not as intimidating as he first envisaged it would be. Uncle Dylan's torches were remarkably bright, so it made his insufferable challenging mission to find little Billy a whole lot more bearable. If the truth be told, Sam had always been desperately afraid of the dark, but this was something he was not prepared to admit to any of his friends. It would make him a wuss, and reputation was everything when you were 16 years old. For God's sake, he told himself, keep it together, Sam. If you fall apart like Aunt Beth would do, you'll never find your cousin. He knew from his father that if you were caught up in a tumultuous situation, you needed to focus on what you were doing, and not allow your mind to stray or entertain itself with disquieting thoughts. Panic can kill you, son, his father had told him once. So navigating himself rather awkwardly down the precarious, erratic, rocky paths, bespeckled with a tangle of rigorously wild foliage and thick, gnarly roots that clawed their way through the earth in a series of inappropriate, squiggly shapes that rather resembled a road map, was by no means easy. One of those roots would throw him on his feet, so he needed to pay attention to where he was going, or he'd end up in trouble. He could hear the sounds of crickets and frogs sending out their musical trills, but they stopped their chorus when Sam began to call out for his cousin. His voice travelled through the woods, returning to him with an echo. "Billy! Billy, where are you? It's me, it's Sammy. Everything's all right. Those horrible men have gone. I promise you they've gone." Sammy threw his torchlight over the lumpy dark obstacles in his way, while his sneakers pounded the twigs and fallen leaves beneath his feet that made a popping noise. For a brief second, Sam stopped dead in his tracks. He glanced nervously over his shoulders, flashing his torchlight over every indistinct nook and cranny in the grove. Someone was there. He knew it with every single fibre of his being. And whoever it was, they were clandestinely watching him. He knew it. He could feel eyes burning into him. He began to flash his light nervously all over the woods, trying to smoke out anything that might be clandestinely hiding in plain sight. "Hello! Hello, is anybody there?" he called out in a trembling voice. "Is anybody there?" He was met with a stern, disquieting silence that did not ease the pounding heartbeats that began to drum-roll in his chest so wildly, rather like a herd of bison galloping across a vast wilderness at a mighty, mighty speed. "Don't be ridiculous," Sam told himself very sternly. "You're imagining things are there, when they're not actually there. No one is watching you. Now, for goodness sake, Sam, do what you came here to do. Concentrate on finding your cousin, and don't lose your bottle." The self-talk that Sam often engaged in when he lacked confidence encouraged him to call out again, although this time his voice sounded a little shrill. "Billy!" he called out, his voice shaking like a baby's rattle. "It's me, Sam! It's safe to come out now. It really is. Those bad men are gone. I promise you they're gone." His calls were still met by a paradoxical silence that seemed both unnatural, inauspicious, and outer-worldly. The ill-omened feeling of being watched just would not go away. It was relentless. It seemed to cling to him like a thorny briar that refused to evacuate itself from his clothing. Sam knew something or someone was watching him. There was no doubt about it in his mind. He had such a profound certainty about it. It was a feeling that pulverized all his confidence. The woods seemed to become bodefully menacing, especially after he heard an owl hoot, then a flapping of gigantic wings, and the eerie sound of someone's feet crushing the forest foliage, as if they were stalking him very discreetly. The ominous haunting sounds that Sam was hearing had made him practically jump out of his skin. He was desirous to get the hell out of these woods as fast as he possibly could, rather like a frightened rabbit scurrying right back to the safety of its burrow. But Sam was cruelly reminded that finding little Billy was of pivotal importance. He couldn't think about his own feelings now. He had a duty of responsibility and care for little Billy, who his Aunt Beth had faithfully put under his charge. Tonight he had failed his cousin in his babysitting duties so very badly that little Billy had run away. No doubt his little cousin had been absolutely terrified. Traumatic visions teased his mind, rather unscrupulously, where he could see himself telling Aunt Beth that little Billy was missing. He knew only too well how Aunt Beth would react to such devastating news. "Missing? What on earth do you mean that little Billy is missing? Sam, I asked you to look after my son for me. Your mother assured me you could be trusted, and now Billy is missing. How could you have been so irresponsibly negligent? I asked you to do this one thing for me, to stay awake all night and to keep your eyes pinned on little Billy. But you failed me. I hope you're proud of yourself, Sam. I'll never ever trust you again. Never. You've been such a dreadful disappointment to me. If we cannot find Billy, I shall never forgive you as long as I live." "You can do this, Sam," he told himself. "Get a grip. No one is watching you. You have to find little Billy or Aunt Beth will kill you." "Billy!" he called out again. "Billy, are you there? It's me, Sam. Those bad men have gone. I promise you, you're safe now. You can come out of your hiding place." All of a sudden, Sam saw a pair of yellow eyes staring at him through overhanging leafy foliage. Those eyes belonged to somebody formidably large, but what it was, Billy's darkest nightmares could not entertain. "What the hell?" he thought. "What on earth is that?" The gargantuan, dark, lumpy shadow of a colossal, ambiguously indistinct being gracefully glided towards him, swinging 2 pairs of overlong arms. The yellow eyes were fixed directly on him. Sam felt certain that he had become dinner for this outlandish creature, whatever it was, and that he had only seconds left to live on this planet, as if his life was now ebbing away very quickly like when you're in a car accident and your life flashes before you, and deep in your gut you feel as if you're not going to get out of this situation alive. Everything for Sam seemed to happen in slow motion, as if every vital second had become agonizingly long, and in those cruel, excruciating seconds he peacefully surrendered to what was about to unfold, as his fate was galvanizing the flow of his life, which was now out of his control. It was pointless trying to fight against it. All Sam wanted to do in the very beginning of this outlandishly absurd encounter was to run away. His heart had been thundering violently in his chest. He had thought he would pass out, faint and collapse on the forest floor. He had tried so desperately to run away, but his legs would not oblige his pleading requests. They felt like cinder blocks beneath him that were anchored to one spot, unable to move an inch. "Run!" came the authoritative voice in his head. "Run!" But all the red warning lights of danger going off in his mind, like fireworks on the 4th of July, did little to propel him forward. Instead, he stood on the forest floor, like a rather redundant firework that refused to take off into the sky, even after it was ignited with a match. It would seem in seconds an inexplicable peace overcame him, and he physically relaxed, as if he had chosen just to let go, like someone who's been holding their breath under the water for far too long, and then finally they draw in that life-giving oxygen when they find an air hole, and they feel only relief to inhale that fresh air. The creature was now standing feet away from him, studying him inquisitively, and in the bright, blazing light of his torch, Sam was in no doubt about what he was seeing. It was a Bigfoot. Sam had always thought that such cryptid creatures existed only in fictitious legends, made up by the indigenous people from the Americas, many who claimed to have absurd encounters with such outer-worldly mysterious things, and talked about these strange phenomenon, and creatures like the Wendigo, skinwalkers, and Bigfoots, of course. He'd read stories about such bizarre encounters, but he always took such legends with a pinch of salt. He was of the opinion that if such beings really existed, then there would be more documented evidence about them. But now he realized, in this quintessential moment, that things can indeed exist in our reality, even when we fail to see them. Sam realized his encounter with this extraordinary creature would be forever burnt into his memory with an indelible insistence, for he realized the Bigfoot was very much real. He felt no fear. He sensed the Bigfoot was benign, and her intentions towards him were certainly not nefarious. She seemed benevolent. If she intended to hurt him, she'd have done so already. Sam realized the Bigfoot was female, for a couple of small pert breasts were discernible beneath the thick thatch of dark hair that covered her entire body generously. Her face was remarkably human-looking. Sam was taken aback that the creature had pronounced cheekbones, a flat aquatic nose, a pyramid-shaped head, and in truth she was like a human being, but massive in size, covered in hair, with overlong arms, ponderous shoulders, and a body that was rippled with muscle. A body that was burly and big, but the Bigfoot's gait was at the same time both nimble and extremely graceful. Sam found himself inexplicably drawn to looking directly into the creature's amber eyes, and when he did this he heard the discernible words in his head, spoken to him telepathically in a commanding but sweet female voice. "Follow me. I'll take you to the child you're looking for." Sam found himself caught up under a hypnotic-like trance, as the magnetism the Bigfoot exuded was absolutely gripping. He unhesitantly, without even so much as batting an eyelash, promptly followed the Bigfoot through the woods, wondering if this was all an illusory dream, from which he would surely awaken. But when he pinched himself ever so hard, he realized that this was no dream at all. But he had no clue where the Bigfoot was taking him. The Bigfoot stopped at a tree. She let out a shrill whistle. Sam heard some rustling sounds, and then he saw his little cousin Billy, peering nervously down at them through the leafy foliage of the tree, where he was literally sitting on a tree branch, almost as if it was a swing. The Bigfoot then reached out to lift little Billy off the branch and put him ever so gently onto the ground, She took Billy's hand in hers, and then Billy saw Sam, so he ran to his cousin. Sam was thrilled to see little Billy. The relief in seeing him safe and well almost brought tears to his eyes. He looked up into the Bigfoot's eyes rather questioningly. She communicated with him, again in this extraordinary telepathic exchange, that Sam would never be able to forget. The poor little one! He was wandering around the woods so aimlessly. I could feel his fear. I had to help him. I had to intervene. It grieved my heart to feel his distress. He couldn't see where he was going. He was confused and disorientated, for your kind have dim eyes. I brought him to this tree to keep him safe in the branches here. I knew you would arrive shortly, and here you are. Sam gathered little Billy into his arms, holding him tightly. Are you all right, Billy? What happened? Why did you run into the woods like that? I was really scared, said Billy. There were 2 bad men in the house. I saw them bending the window bars back, crawling into the kitchen. I knew they were bad men. I could tell that they were up to no good. I came into the woods and the hairy lady hid me in the tree so that the men couldn't hurt me. The hairy lady's very nice. She said she wouldn't let anybody go near me. The bad men have gone, said Sam reassuringly. It's safe to come back home now, I promise. Follow me, said the Bigfoot, throwing little Billy over her shoulders. I'll take you back to the house. Sam found himself following the Bigfoot, who was carrying Billy. Billy was squealing with delight, as if this was all a wonderful game. When they reached the edge of the woods overlooking his uncle and aunt's house, the Bigfoot put little Billy down. Then she nodded at Sam and Billy, and then glided away. Sam took his cousin's hand in his, and they both walked straight to the fire escape to get back into the house by way of the stairs. Are you sure the bad men are gone? Asked Billy. I'm sure, said Sam. They won't be coming back. I can promise you that. Sam looked at his cousin Billy thoughtfully and said, If your mum knew the bad men got into the house tonight, Billy, then she'd be very upset, wouldn't she? Billy nodded. She'd be sad. She wouldn't like it. She doesn't like strangers talking to me. Well, you don't like it when your mum gets upset, do you, Billy? No, I hate it when she gets upset because she cries. I think she'll cry, Billy, if she knows the men got into the house. Billy nodded. I think she would cry, he admitted. Do you think you can keep a secret, Billy? Just between you and me? I can keep secrets, said Billy proudly. I kept Letitia's secret at school. I never told anybody that she stole the teacher's Mickey Mouse pencil that she got from Disneyland. She begged me not to tell anyone she'd stolen it, and I never did. Well, there you go then. I don't want you to tell your mum about the 2 bad men that climbed through the kitchen window, because if you tell your mum that, she'll cry, and you don't want her to cry, do you? So do you think you can keep a secret? Billy looked rather solemn, and finally nodded. I won't tell her anything, I promise. Cross my heart, hope to die if I tell a lie. Good boy, Billy. I knew I could trust you. Sam tucked his cousin Billy into bed, and the moment the little boy's head hit the pillow, he had fallen into a deep sleep. The poor little mite was absolutely exhausted. Sam then retreated to the kitchen to clear up the mess. He placed the duffel bag that Ernie and Trout had left behind in the yard shed, where he hid it discreetly behind some bags of compost and some rusty old tins of paint that had dried up a long time ago. He marvelled over the idiosyncratic events of the evening. Sam sat back comfortably on the white leather couch. He continued to read his Enid Blyton book, but alas, his mind was far away from the book that initially had been so gripping it had held his undivided attention. But the peculiar events of the evening had out-trumped even Enid Blyton, if that was at all possible. Not only had 2 bumbling idiots broken into Aunt Beth's house, but his cousin Billy had hidden in the woods and had been taken care of by a female Bigfoot. You just couldn't make all this stuff up. It was 2:30 on the dot when Uncle Dylan's white Mercedes rolled down the driveway. He could hear the engine stop, the sound of muffled voices, doors slamming, and the key being turned in the lock, as his aunt and uncle entered the house. Sam's heart began to twitch nervously when he heard his Aunt Beth running towards the library, where she stood in the doorway, looking questioningly at Sam. "Is everything all right, Sam? I hope my little Billy hasn't been giving you too much trouble this evening, and that he's been behaving himself," said Aunt Beth. "You have been checking up on him during the night, I hope, every half hour as you promised to do so." "But of course I have, Aunt Beth. And your little son is absolutely fine." "You gave him his dinner at 5 o'clock, did you?" "But of course, Aunt Beth. I grilled the dinosaur chicken nuggets like you asked me to, and I didn't even burn them. I cooked the oven-fried chips for you on a baking tray, and I steamed the broccoli for him." "And did he eat his broccoli? It's so important he eats his greens." "Yes, he did, Aunt Beth." Sam could not help smiling inwardly, as he remembered how cheeky little Billy had eaten up all his cookie dough ice cream, and then pulled out of his cheeks the flaccid-looking florets of broccoli. "Did you read him a bedtime story? You did say you would." "But of course I did, Aunt Beth. I did everything you asked me to." Aunt Beth came into the library. "Oh, I'm so relieved everything is fine. You have no idea how worried I've been. I'm not used to leaving Billy in somebody else's charge. You must forgive me, Sam, for being so pedantic. Sometimes I just can't help myself. I get overwrought with worry, you know." Uncle Dylan was standing in the doorway of the library. He grinned widely from ear to ear. "Honestly, what is your aunt like, Sam? I must apologize for her. She overreacts all the time. I told her Billy would be absolutely fine in your charge, and it seems I was not wrong." "Did you enjoy the party, Aunt Beth?" Billy asked. "Oh, it was lovely, Billy. Thank you for asking. Very kind of you. Yes, we had such fun. The food was excellent, the entertainment marvellous, and your uncle's speech was absolutely amazing. He made everybody laugh." "So you weren't scared, Uncle Dylan, when you spoke in front of all those people?" "Of course I was terrified, but your Aunt Beth stoically stood at my side, and I soon forgot how nervous I was. Everybody said my speech was wonderful." "Thank you for looking after Billy, Sam. Your mother told me I could trust you with my life, and it seems she wasn't wrong about that. You didn't let me down, as you faithfully promised you wouldn't." Aunt Beth thrust a wad of notes into Sam's hands. "That's for doing such a sterling job. I'm very proud of you, Sam. You've earned every single penny." "If only you knew the half of it," thought Sam to himself, who was glad to find that the following morning Billy made no mention of the bad men that had broken into the house through the kitchen window. But he came to the breakfast table in his pyjamas, with some leaves in his hair, and his pyjamas looking really rather filthy. "Goodness gracious me, Billy," said Aunt Beth. "Why are your pyjamas so dreadfully dirty? Why are there leaves in your hair?" "Me and Sam were playing a game," said little Billy. It was later that afternoon that Billy began to indiscriminately draw pictures of the female Bigfoot he had encountered in the wood grove the night before. Aunt Beth began to inquire about the picture, because it was rather unorthodox, unlike anything that Billy had ever drawn before. "What is it you've drawn there?" she asked. "This is the nice lady with the long hair," he said proudly. "She lives in the woods over there," he said, pointing to the woods. Sam began to inwardly panic. Please God, he thought, Billy, don't you dare tell Aunt Beth what happened last night. But he needn't have worried, because Billy didn't give much information out. "Does she now?" said Aunt Beth with a twinkle in her eyes, clearly amused by Billy's explanation. Sam was relieved that Aunt Beth thought her son was drawing a fictitious character in crayon that rather resembled a bear. Aunt Beth studied the picture inquisitively and smiled. "So what's the nice lady with the hair called, Billy?" she asked. Billy looked up at his mother and grinned. "Her name is Inina." "Inina?" said Aunt Beth, looking perplexed. "Where did you get such an extraordinary name from like that, Billy? I don't know anyone called Inina." "I told you," said little Billy, looking a little peeved, as if he thought his mother was really, really stupid for not knowing the name. I told you her name is Inina. It means Lady of the Flower. Oh, really? Said Aunt Beth, looking rather perturbed that her little boy had actually given the hairy lady's name a meaning. Where had her son come out with all these bizarre claims, she wondered. You've got quite the imagination on you, love, haven't you? She said, ruffling her 7-year-old's hair rather affectionately. Billy looked very annoyed. He hated it when his mother messed his hair up like this. You don't believe me, Mummy, do you? I'm telling you the truth. Her name is Inina. Don't put words in my mouth, Billy. I never said I didn't believe you, did I? Said Aunt Beth, trying to be kind. The Lady of the Flower. What an unusual name. I wonder why she's called that. It's 'cause when she was born, her father put a flower in her hand. She really liked it, so her dad would bring her a flower every day. She liked flowers, so her daddy said that she was the Lady of the Flower. She loves flowers a lot, you see. She's always picking them for herself. I see, said Aunt Beth, looking rather puzzled by her son's impassionate outburst about this so-called hairy lady that he had drawn. She'd never seen her son so enthused by an imaginary friend, and in the months that followed he kept drawing these pictures of the hairy lady. A bizarre behaviour that continued for some time, leaving Aunt Beth somewhat bewildered, so much so, in fact, that she shared the odd, enigmatic matter with her sister Julie. I don't know what's going on with little Billy, Julie. Really, I don't. Ever since your Sam came to stay with us, Billy's been on about a hairy lady called Inina, who he insists lives in the woods. At first Billy was interested in Mickey Mouse, but he never talks about Mickey Mouse anymore. These days it's all about Inina. Inina this, Inina that, Inina the next thing. I even asked Billy's teacher at school if she'd ever heard of the name Inina. She said maybe Billy is talking about a girl at school called Nina. They often play together, I believe. Well, I wouldn't worry about it, Beth, if I was you, Sam's mother had chuckled. Kids, you know what they're like. They always go through phases, don't they? When they're fixated about something. I mean, when I was growing up, if you remember, it was Snoopy that got my attention. Well, I suppose you're right, said Aunt Beth. But it's still rather bizarre, don't you think? No, Beth, I don't, actually. I think kids naturally have wild imaginations on them. And it's something we should actually encourage rather than challenge. It was weeks later that Aunt Beth noticed the window in her kitchen had been tampered with, and the bars bent backwards. But luckily she didn't connect the dots, and believed someone had attempted to break into the house. So the very next day, an alarm was installed, and it would seem Uncle Dylan's fabulous collection of books was now relatively safe, especially from Ernie and Trout, who had lightly told everybody that would listen that there was a tiger loitering around the Valinsky property. So there we are, that is the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.